Okay, this meeting's being recorded.
Everything.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's third Thursday Zoom series presentation. Before we start tonight's program, I would like to briefly review our calendar of scheduled events for the rest of this year. We will have a table at the farmers markets on July 21st, August 18th, and September 15th. All dates are Wednesdays from 4 to 7 p.m. We will have items for sale and answer questions from visitors about our society. On Thursday, August 19th at 7 p.m., we will have a Zoom presentation entitled Boats on the Connecticut River, Tracing the Evolution of Boating from the 1600s until today. A September program is in the planning stages, so watch our website and Facebook posts for details. We will be participating in the planned Quarry Park hike at 10 a.m. on September 25th. Regarding tonight's program is Tracing Your Family's History, subtitled Genealogy 101 for us that have a lot to learn, which is presented by Tim Honan, who is a society member and has an avid interest in the subject matter. So I'll turn it over to Tim and we'll begin our program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple basic things here. One is this is a high-level presentation. I'm going to be blasting through stuff pretty quickly here. We're trying to touch on a lot of different topics. But please, if you have questions, we've got a small enough group, just jump in with questions. I will pause from time to time in between topics to specifically ask for questions. But for the most part, just jump in if I go by something too fast or you want to have a follow-up question to something I'm saying. So any questions before I get started?
How do I see you?
I have see me as in the...
All I have is Tracing Your Family History on my screen.
That's what we should be looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere else, they might have another little window that has everybody's faces. It's a Zoom window.
I can't find it. I'm touching everything. I can't find it. But go ahead. I'll keep up.
Tim, if she goes up to the top right, if you go up to the top right where it says view, you see something where it says view?
No, it says more, 13 participants, share content. How about start video?
Start video would be, well, that's going to start your video. You need to find something that says view. And once you see it, it's going to say side-by-side view, speaker view, or gallery view.
Yeah, I've done Zoom before and I can always find gallery, but I'm not finding it here. Sorry.
Well, Tim is a handsome man, so.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
All right.
Thank you.
There you go.
Honestly, I'm backlit here, so you can't see my face very well anyway, so it's not a big loss. So if we're all set and all lined up, I will begin here.
Okay.
Moving on to the second page, not counting the title page. First note I have for everyone is congratulations, you're all descended from royalty. And this is just math. If you go back 1,000 years, you're going to find you have, and none of your ancestors are related to each other. You're going to find you have about 1 billion ancestors. And no matter where you're from, there weren't 1 billion people in that part of the world 1,000 years ago. So the bottom line is you are descended from royalty. Kings and princes and queens tended to have a lot of children, more than the average. So without doubt, you are descended from royalty. You're also descended from every serf, peasant, thief, and everybody else who had children alive that descends to this day. So you're basically descended from everybody. And that's something to always look at this. It's amazing at how the world hinges on tiny little things. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, this will be a high-level introductory discussion. What I'm talking about is the things you need to get started and get your stuff started off correctly. Deciding on the scope of your work, where to find information, how to store it, how to share it, DNA testing, which is the only thing that really shows up as controversial in this whole topic. and tips and tricks to get you off to a good start. And a lot of these things are based on things that I messed up some 10 or 15 years ago when I started, having to do everything all over the second time. And so I'm trying to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. So with that, we'll start the first topic here. First thing to do before you get started is decide on the scope of your research. It's really a good idea to get a sense for what your goal is and what you're trying to accomplish before you get started. Because if you change your mind after you get into it a year or two or three, you're going to find you have to loop back and look through everything a second time, which is not a catastrophe. A lot of people, including me, have done it, but it does take a lot of time that could be saved if you spend the time up front thinking about what it is you want to do at the end. And so hint number one is begin with an end in mind. And that's really a follow-up to what I was saying before. And my notes here just say, are you trying to satisfy your own curiosity? Will you become the family historian? You know, the person that a lot of families have somebody who goes to the family events, the weddings, the funerals, whatever, and just keeps track of the history and introduces the history to other people. Do you want to join a lineage society? And you need to think about, if you want to do that, this is the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Mayflower descendants, or one of those things. The reason I put that in there is if your goal is to get into a lineage society, you have to be very specific about what kind of references you use and how you cite information. And if you decide 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, you're going to do that, again, you're going to have to loop back to everything. You're going to have to improve all of your references, all of your sites. It's time that you can avoid spending if you know what you want to do up front. And as I say here at the end, the amount of research required in detail and form of documentation depends on how you answer these questions. And decide on the breadth of your research. And again, this is the thing that caused me to go back a second time, or one of the things that caused me to go back a second time. Do you want to just look at your ancestors? Do you want to look at your ancestors and their siblings? Do you want to look at your ancestors and siblings and the siblings' children? Or some combination of that? This is important. Is I started with just looking at ancestors. And one of the things I learned as I got into this and I started doing newsletters and stuff to the family was that it really matters whether a person was an only child or whether they came from a family with 12 children. It affected their life and how they lived. And I ended up going back and looking at getting some basic information on my ancestors' siblings. So that was a second pass through a lot of the information. It took a lot of time, but for me, it was the right thing to do. Now, when I say the siblings' children, my general rule, and everyone can have a different opinion on this, is that if I'm going to run into somebody at a family event, the wedding, the funeral, the picnic, whatever, I want to know how they're related to me. So when you get within the last 100 years or so, I like to trace the siblings and the siblings' children, in other words, your cousins. So when I run into somebody, I know whether they're my second cousin, third cousin, second cousin once removed, and we'll find out what that means in a couple of pages here. But so I happen to go the combination route where I follow the ancestors and siblings when you get more than 100 years ago. But within the last 100 years, I go with the siblings and the siblings' children. Again, the key thing is that you'll know your cousins when you find them at a wedding or something. But the thing that's important to remember is that the more you look at, the longer it's going to take to get it done, because everything grows exponentially. With every generation, you have twice as many people to look at. And if you start and cousins and stuff like that, the number grows really, really fast. How far back do you go? And to me, it's helpful to know roughly where you want to go. If you really are only interested in the last 100 years, last 200 years, or maybe you're only interested in the people that when they first came to the United States or to North America, and you want to go back to there and sort of stop, if you don't decide how far back you want to go, you can find, you trace one line to Europe, Asia, Africa, wherever, and you can get in loops there and spend a tremendous amount of time. That's difficult finding ancestors going back into other countries often. And you spin your wheels on a tremendous amount of time when that time would be better spent looking for ancestors that are closer to you now. So you really need to ask yourself, how far back do you go? What I chose to do here is I went back to the ancestors into North America. It started with the US, then I found I had a lot of French Canadian ancestors. So I sort of evolved to when the first immigration to North America was. So do I know people came from Ireland, France, Germany? Yes, I know they did. If I can find the information easily, that's great, but I don't spend a lot of time researching the European stuff. It can be done, but it takes a lot more time once you get into other countries, because a lot of times the records aren't as good or they're just harder to find. So that is the summary of that. I will pause there for a second to see if anybody has any questions on the introductory type information here, the high-level thoughts. And hearing none, I will move on to the illustration of relationships. I put this slide in here because a lot of people, including me when I started out, I didn't know how to tell how a person was related to me or how that person was named. You keep hearing about cousins that are once removed and twice removed, and I really didn't know what that meant. This is an attempt to explain that. So my suggestion, if you're going to get serious on this, is take this page, set it aside, and looking at it from time to time to understand the relationship between people. Again, even if you're only going to be the family historian, you find somebody, you see somebody once every second or third year as they go to a wedding or a funeral or whatever. If you want to describe how they are, you need to understand the once removed and the twice removes. What we're trying to do here is we start with a source person. This is you. And I won't spend an awful lot of time. We understand who our parents are, our siblings or brothers and sisters are. We understand niece and nephew. We understand grandparents. Siblings of our parents are aunt and uncle, cousins. So this part of the chart is pretty well understood by most people. Now, as we start to move from there, it can get a little bit, say, trickier, but less well known. The parents of your grandparents, probably not a surprise there. The parents of your great-grandparents are your great-great-grandparents, sometimes called your 2G grandparents. And this goes back further and further. You got one generation early, it's your great-great-great-grandparent or your 3G grandparent. And you can go 4G, 5G, 6G grandparents. You get back into the 1600s and the 1700s, you're in the 5G, 6G grandparents. So that's how the grandparents move. From there, you have a sibling of your grandparent is your great aunt or great uncle. No surprise there. Now, what I want to do go back, we had first cousin, where you have a grandparent as your common ancestor. Now, if you have a great-grandparent as your most recent common ancestor, they are a second cousin. A third cousin has a great-great-grandparent as your common ancestor. So that's where the numbered cousins come in, first, second, and third cousin. Again, it goes to fourth, fifth, and sixth as you get further off the chart, but hopefully you'll understand the concept from here. Now the removes, and what does all that mean? The child of your first cousin is your first cousin once removed. Once removed as in one generation removed.
Oh.
Right. And the grandchild of your first cousin is your first cousin twice removed, 2 generations removed from your level. And again, second cousin is the child of your second cousin is your second cousin once removed, second cousin twice removed. And I run into a lot of these at various weddings and funerals. I have a lot of second cousins I keep track of. They're all my age. I have grandchildren. So the second cousins twice removed tend to be the little kids that are running around. You know, the kids that tend to be under 5 and 10 years old. Third cousins, you know, once removed, twice removed, same concept. Now it gets a little bit trickier. Let's go up into this box here. This says first cousin twice removed. You say, but that's a great grandparent. And the answer is, well, not really. Your closest ancestor of the two of you. So from the point of view of this person, the common ancestor is a grandparent. It may be your great-great-grandparent, but to this person, it's a grandparent. So the first cousin applies because it's the grandparent of the earliest generation person. But it's the first cousin, I keep losing my cursor here, first cousin twice removed because you have to go down 2 generations to get to your level here. So you can have a first cousin twice removed up here, or a first cousin twice removed down here. Sometimes here is referred to as ascending and sometimes as descending. But you got to think here again, first cousin is a grandparent, is the common ancestor between these two people. Here, first cousin is, this would be a grandparent to this person, and you're 2 behind. So this person is to this person as you are to that person. First cousin, twice removed. So that gets a little complicated in getting the removed and how you can get it the symmetry both ways. But I want to pause there to see if anybody has any questions or thoughts or anything I can help you with here before I move on to another topic. Okay, and away we go then.
Tom, I do have a question.
Sure.
My mother's cousin, would that be my second cousin?
Your mother's, is it your mother's first cousin?
Yes.
Okay, now your mother's first cousin, this would be the common person, right? This is you, this is your mother. The person would be up here. So if it's your first cousin, if it's your mother's first cousin, it would be your first cousin once removed.
Once removed. Thank
Right,
you.
so your parents' first cousin, and you are 1 generation away from that, your first cousin once removed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, other questions, thoughts? Okay, off we go. Types of information available. And I'm not even scratching the surface. I'm just sort of brushing up against it here. But I'll give you a sense of the kind of information that's out there. So, first thing I want to talk about are church and civil birth, marriage, and death records, often referred to as hatch, match, and dispatch. Let me zoom in a little bit here so we can see this a little bit better. Sample marriage record, and I deliberately put this one in, it's in French. I did this kind of on purpose. I obviously have a lot of records that are in English, but it's in French. Now, I do not speak French. I do not read French very well. I came up with a little cheat sheet of what the numbers are and the dates are, words like father, mother, sister, kind of words. But once you learn the basic structure, you can get a lot of information out of it, even if you really don't know how to read it. So this is from somewhere up in Quebec, French Canadian. Now, once you learn the standard format, you can pull a lot of information out here. The standard format that the church records use, they always start with the date. This says on the 13th day of the month of October of the 1666 or 1766. Stuff after the publication of Banns of Marriage. Then you find the name of the groom here, son of these 2 people, son of a father and a mother, married this person, the name of the bride, daughter of, and here's the father and the mother of the bride. Here's a bunch of information in the middle. It turns out this says they were dispensed with the 2nd and 3rd banns of marriage, a bunch of stuff which may or may not be interesting. You get into, here's a list of the people that were there, the witnesses, the name of the priest. And over here, the standard format there is they have the name of the principals. There's the husband and the wife here. Even though I don't speak French and can't read French, I can get a tremendous amount of information from this. Basic, here's what the numbers are. Here's basic words, sister, brother, mother, daughter, those kind of things. And understanding the standard format. So you get discouraged if the records are not in the language you speak. With a little bit of looking and scratching your head and a little bit of research, you can find out the standard format and still pull a tremendous amount of information from it. The next thing I want to look at is a sample death record. This is a much more recent vintage one. This is my great-grandmother. We'll have to see a picture of her and come back to more information about her later. This is a death record from March 13th, 1908. What you can pull out of this, her address, the date of her death, the age at her death, her race, whether she was single or not, name, her husband's name, her birthplace, the name of her father, the birthplace of her father, name of her mother, the birthplace of her mother, her occupation, in this case, a housewife, where she's buried, the cause of death. There's a tremendous amount of information you can pull off of these, and every single piece is something you can drop in to spreadsheet. I'll talk about computers and how to, the kind of programs they have. I can talk about that later. But if you use that, every little snippet of information becomes an entry into the thing. And it becomes a really powerful way to get an awful lot of information to people from pulling all of these little snippets of information from here. I'll talk about census records. Same thing, let me zoom in a little bit so we can see it. And this is bridged version. I got rid of the columns that were of less interest to me. But census records are huge, they have a huge amount of information that's extraordinarily helpful. What we have here, remember we just saw Hilda Moore, Cornell. That's her. That's the woman that died in 1906. This is the 1900 census, so she's obviously still alive at that point. This husband, the head of the household, yeah, that's about a century ago, the head of the household was usually a guy, unless there was a widow. But that's my great-great-grandfather, my great-grandmother. They happen to be living at 49 Classic Street with their son and their daughter-in-law and their two children, Grace and Edna, Edna being my grandmother. So here you see my grandmother was 2 years old at this point. This is 1900. You also find out the relationship to each other, again, son, daughter-in-law, granddaughter. Color or race, again, their sex, month and year of their birth, age at last birthday, whether single, married, widowed, or divorced. So they're all married except the children are way too young. Number of years married, and these two columns I often find to be interesting. It's a number of how many children, a number of children still alive. In this case, both women have had two children, both of whom are still alive. It's not uncommon at all to see this number to be like 8 and this number to be like 4. It's very, very common. When you see the old census records, you get to realize how fragile life was, particularly for young children in the old, and when you get back more than a century ago. I have lots and lots of cases. I got one that's, I think there's 11 children, 4 of whom are alive. Occupation, blacksmith, dressmaker, a machinist. We'll come back to the machinist a little bit later. That whole branch of my family are machinists. This is the daughter of, he's a machinist, she's the daughter of a machinist. Her grandfather was an inventor and a machinist. So this occupation here can give you a lot of information about what their life was like and what they were doing. Education, can they read, can they write, and can they speak English? What you find here, now these are semi-recent immigrants from French Canada. They can read English, they can they can speak English, but not quite to the point of being able to write it yet. If you look in 1910, you see these both say yes, or it says yes anyway for Adeline. I think he's dead by 1910. So you can almost sell that they're recent in the country by the fact that they can't write. And that was very common. If you go back 100, 200 years ago, people couldn't write. Probate records, and there's a tremendous amount you can pull out of them. And this one happens to be the inventory of the estate of Andrew Moore, who was like my 6th or 7th grade grandfather. And this is just a snippet in the upper left-hand corner of one of 4 pages, but it starts, some basic stuff. December the 17th day of 1719, the inventory taken of the estate of Andrew Moore, deceased December the 29th of 1719. Bill of credit, and it's a list of all of his stuff. Wearing clothes, blue plain cloth coat, loose-bodied coat, and the value of everything. There were over like 200 separate items. And by looking at these items, you really get a sense for what their life was like and what they owned, and how everything was passed along. Things were not thrown out. The concept of garbage is a recent concept. Everything was passed on to people. And by looking at this, I turned myself into a nerd by trying to look through how everything was appraised in different parts of the inventory. They talk about which child gets how much amount. I try to do the auditing on it to tie everything out. And you learn how British money works, like 20 shillings to a pound and 12 pence to a shilling. You learn about widow's third. The widow typically got a third of all the estate. You got an example of how that worked. There's land versus movable estate. These are what we call property now versus land, and how that worked in inheritances. Oldest son got a double share. This isn't primogeniture where the oldest got pretty much everything, but it was a variation of that where the son still got a double share. So there were 9 people inheriting, so they divided the total amount by 10. The eldest son got a double share. And how early distribution of inheritance work. A lot of times they'd have a child who was trying to build a house. Gee, Dad, could I get some money to build a house as an early inheritance? Sure, I'll give you 20 pounds. And there's an example that literally they kept track of all of that. And that shows up in all of the math as to how much money everybody got. So I really got a lot of information on how things worked in the early 1700s. Wills, what their property life was like, what their life was like. Totally fascinating information you can put on that. Further types of information available here. I'm just gonna touch the things to let you know. But there's newspapers, particularly obituaries. Obituaries have a lot of information on, the son of this person and that person, and whose children are, and who's still alive and who isn't, and who's married to who. So obituaries are very, very helpful. City directories are very common. They're like phone books before there were phones, but instead of having a phone number, it has the person's occupation. So I have a lot of people, I had a lot of ancestors in Troy, find out, so-and-so lived at this, here's the address, and he was a heater, he was a laborer. And the professions meant something in those days. You very much were what your profession was. Gravestones, obviously, birth and death dates, and just the proximity of who's near it, sometimes you can learn a lot. Military records, service records, and draft registration cards before World War I and World War II. There's a lot of information, including a lot of times, person's height, weight, eye color, who to notify if there's a problem, often a wife or a parent. Tremendous amount of information, registration cards. Family Bibles. I didn't realize it until I started doing this, but you look through a Bible, often there'll be a page and it may be blank, but it has something about births, deaths, and marriages. A lot of times people fill that out. If you go back 200 years ago or 100 years ago, those were filled out commonly. People didn't have printed documents. They didn't have paper, so they used the empty pages in the Bible to record important personal events like birth and marriage. So one of, well, I got a cousin, it's not someone in a blood relation, it's the other side of the family, who had a family Bible that's like from the mid 1800s. And somebody had put all of the birth, death, and marriages in it. And it was hugely helpful for tracing down that line of the family. Immigration records are very, very common to find when people came into the country, where they came from. And old family photos are enormously helpful. I put this one in because it's one of my favorite photos. Remember the woman who died? That's my only picture of her. And this is my mother here. This is my grandmother from, I'll say about 1904, 1905. Now, the reason, and I also note here, especially if they're labeled, this came from I'm sort of the family historian. I took over from my aunt, who was sort of the family historian before me. She had collected a bunch of old photos that were in a box. And she took the time, bless her, to write on the back of it her best guess as to who everybody in the picture was and roughly when it was taken. And so when I talked to my cousin, this was after my aunt had died, I talked to my cousin, she said, you know, I think I got this box from Ma in my closet. Let me go look. She says, yeah, and I got a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of pictures. I said, oh, if you can, you know, pull some good ones out of it and trust me with a cent, it'll be great. She sent me the whole box. And this was one of the pictures in there. It's wonderful. So if you've got old pictures, please keep them. Please write anyone you know. If you know who's in it, write it on the back, because someday this can be really helpful to someone. But the specifics of this picture, when you look at it, you see that this is obviously an old car. It's like bicycle wheels on normal car tires. It's got a very distinctive frame here. You can tell my grandmother is, I'll say, maybe 6 years old, maybe 7. So it's 1904, 1905. When you look in the old records, you can find out what kind of car this is. This was a steam car. There's a steam engine back in here. And you can also find out, for example, this, you see there's not even a steering wheel. This is a tiller before they even had that. It turns out this, and my aunt didn't know this, but I found this from another picture. This is my great-grandfather. He was a mechanic. He ran a repair shop in town. He was a machinist turned repair shop owner. And this was reputed to be the first car in Westbrook, Massachusetts. This was manufactured for a 5-year period around that in nearby Chicopee. So it all hangs together. And you can see why somebody who ran a repair shop would want to have a car. This is almost like rocket. He's driving around in his car. They must figure he's good at repairing things if he's running a car. This is almost advertising for him. So an awful lot you can get from a photo if you look into the details of the people and the timing and what's in it, and the history of the time and the understanding. So that I want to talk about that one photo, but you know. So I'm going to move on, I think, to a different topic here.
Yeah, Tim, that's a wonderful picture. It's great.
It is, and if you can see that box that I got, it's just full of wonderful picture after wonderful picture. Those of you who know me know I love pictures, and this is among the best that huge pile, that sizable pile I got from my cousin that her mother had. Where to find online information, and I know here that you can find a huge amount of information without leaving your desk. And really, I've been doing this, I don't know, probably like 15 years or so. And I haven't had the time, because for the most part, I was in for most of this. And so I just couldn't do, you know, a week-long trip to here and to go look up in Quebec, or to travel to Europe to look for ancestors or stuff like that. So I was kind of limited in what I could do, but I found a tremendous amount from my desk. And I'm still planning on doing more travel in the future. I was retired for about 2 months or 3 months, I think, when the pandemic hit. So that sort of cramped my style. But over the next year or two, I'm going to have to start doing more traveling again. Here are the sites that I use the most. And believe me, as I noted at the bottom, there's an unbelievably large number of other websites of all sizes. But Ancestry.com, I use this one a lot. It's a subscription. The annual cost in the $200 to $400 range, depending on whether it's international, you want to include the newspapers with part of it, whether you want to include the military records or not. It's not expensive, but it's not cheap either. It's in that kind of in between range. But Ancestry is like, it's like the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. It's just got a huge number of variety of records. And I will note this several times here. If you get into Ancestry, they market this as, they have those little green leaves, and you click on the green leaf, and it gives you more information and will pull it into your tree. Please don't do that. You're pulling information that you haven't verified. You don't know if it's true or not. But if it's tempting to go, in the space of a couple hours, you can get lists of people back into the 16 and 1500s. There's a lot of good stuff, information. There's a lot of good information in there, but when you start getting into somebody else's trees, a lot of that's wrong. So please avoid the temptation to click on the green leaves. Develop your own tree. Look at the trees that are in there. They have a lot of information attached. They might have birth records attached. Good, look at the birth record. If you like it, download it. Great, but don't just click on the green leaf and download your stuff. FamilySearch.org. This is another humongous one. Requires a free account with the minimal information you need to provide. So you have a name and a password. I did this a couple of years ago. I don't remember what it was, but it's just like 2 or 3 things. This is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's, for religious reasons, they do a lot of genealogy research, but it has a huge number and a wide variety of records. Some are searchable and some are not. So you can always do a search and you'll find a lot there. In this organization, you'll find that they have a lot of old microfilm that they have. So you get to that record, but you won't necessarily search on it. That record that we saw a couple pages ago, a couple slides ago, it wasn't searchable. But when you start looking for, I knew that they were from Windsor. So you start in there and say, okay, what country in the United States? Connecticut, Windsor. What are you looking for? Probate records. And you'll find 7 or 8 hits on probate records. You open up and there'll be a digitized version of that microfilm sheet, a whole microfilm roll that they have. If you learn to look at the beginning of this, you'll find out, okay, more. There's a page with all the M's. You look under more. Oh, page 619. Then you scroll forward to page 619 of the document, not of the electronic roll. And let you know, you can find it there. So sometimes you have to do a little bit digging, but there's a tremendous amount of information that can be found there. Again, sometimes you have to do a little digging. You can't just search on the person's name. Find a Grave is a wonderful thing. They have a lot of volunteers go out, just gravestones, and upload the information onto their website. It's free. They generally have photos of the grave, not always, but it's a good way to find photos from far away of people that lived 115, 200 years ago. And Cindy's list, I point this one out because it's just a collection. It's a list that's sorted of various other websites that you can find. So here you say, oh, I'm looking for information on Ireland. Gee, what county? You click on the county, you click on this, and you drill down enough into it, and you can find a whole bunch of websites that have that. And with hot links, you can go right to them. So Cindy's list is a very helpful one if you're looking for information you don't know where else to start.
That Cindy's list is awesome.
It really is.
I just did the genealogical principles course in Boston College, and they show you a lot of stuff from there, and they help you. There's a spot where it can help you translate documents that are in other languages. They have resources from there that you go to do that.
Oh, are they better than Google Translate?
That I don't know. I never looked at that.
Yeah, because I have a lot of French records from my French Canadian roots.
My husband's mother was French Canadian. Well, she was born in Maine, but her whole family is French Canadian. And I was like, a lot of those documents. I mean, like you can kind of guess what they're saying, but
right, you get a sense for it. But a lot of you have a longer document. I'll just put on the electronic version of it, put it in Google Translate, and let it do it. And it's clean. I mean, it's not perfect,
No, yeah,
Get a sense for what's in it. It's very, very helpful.
right. Yeah.
Other sources of information, town records, birth, marriage, and death, obviously. Connecticut State Library, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but you get if you're a Connecticut resident with, you can get a free library card. You get online, you get a tremendous amount of information from there. And there's more information you get if you go there. I have not been there yet personally. I need to get to, that's on the list of things I need to go and see, because that is supposed to be tremendous when you're there, but there's a lot you can get from your desk with just with a library card.
Yeah, go on a Saturday.
Yes, parking is supposed to be challenged up there. Graveyards, I actually did a day trip around here up in Western Massachusetts looking for graveyards of my ancestors. And if you figure out a distance path through them, you can get a lot done in one day. Pictures of them, they're really helpful. It's before photography, that's as close as you can have as a memorial to them, is a graveyard. You kind of get a sense of them. Historical societies, like us, there's tremendous, we're going to be putting together, I think, more genealogy work over the next couple of months. But there's a lot of historical societies, a lot of genealogy information on them, and also research libraries. I'm a member of the Gottfried Library in Middletown.
Yep.
It's been very, very helpful to me. I don't remember exactly what the fees are. It's like $40 or $60 a year or something like that. It's not too bad. But once you're a member, you have access to a lot of information. And for me, as importantly, down there's people that are very helpful. Will you walk in with questions? They will help you. They have a genealogy club once a month. They've been doing it for the last year or two, but I used to go down there once a month. And they have a thing on DNA. They have one on finding your Irish ancestors, one on using old maps. You just never know what it's going to be. And I used to see probably 8 or 9 of them a year. They'd have them once a month. And after 5 or 6 or 7 years, the cumulative amounts you learn from all of these sessions adds up to a lot. So these genealogy resource libraries are helpful. I've been involved with the Godfrey. There's the French-Canadian Genealogy Society of Connecticut and Tolland. I have not been there yet. I didn't realize how much I had in French Canada until after the pandemic hit. I did a lot of research in that branch of the family, but I need to get up there. I'll pause there. If there's any questions, because I'll move on to a different topic here after this. Okay, software. How are we doing for time? Not too bad. Software. Yes, tracking family history can be done without a software program. It's been done for thousands of years without software. But it's hard. I am not inherently an organized person. And I've seen people that have done this with software. At the Gottfried Library, there's a binder. It's about, I want to say, the better part of 20 binders. The history of I think it's the Griswold family. Every person has their own page, their family sheets and everything else, but the issue you run into is that parents and their children, you might number them sequentially so they're similar in the binder. If you find out 5 years later there was another child, you have to give them a sequential number. That sequential number is not like the rest of the families in binder 5. That last child will be in binder 16. That's where you were when that person came in. If you have all of the records, marriage records and stuff like that, they have to be in file cabinets. Tracing people in different binders to the file cabinets, big challenge. If you get a computer program, you can do a lot of this for you. It takes care of keeping all the family people together. It takes care of sorting everything chronologically for you. It keeps all of the records. You can link all of like the birth records with the people. You keep marriage records with both the husband and the wife. You can keep the census records with all the people that are mentioned in the census. So when you look at a person, blam, there's all the documents associated with them right there.
Breaking up.
Far easier to do.
Here?
What's that? Somebody have a question there? Okay. It's just far easier to do. The software displays interesting information in historically standard format. There's a family sheet, the husband on the left, the wife on the right, the husband's parents above him, the wife's parents above her, and the children in the bottom part of the sheet. It's sort of a standard format. Allows, again, far easier tracking of individuals. Electronic documents are attached. How to pick software. There's a lot of different options, but the key thing to remember is that the different programs are far more similar than different. I've chatted with people at the Gottfried Library saying, geez, so what software do you use? And there's half a dozen different variations around there. But the one thing I find is whichever software a person uses, they like that the best. Whatever they used to, they like. People seldom pick up something and say, oh, I hate this, I'm going to switch to another one. No matter whichever one you pick, you'll probably be content with. That said, there are some things, it's worth doing a little bit of research, an hour or two of a little digging to see if there's certain things you're interested in. For instance, I picked one that emphasized the ability to do charting. I happen to like charts. It's sort of like a picture. It puts everyone so you can see visually in one page. So I think charting is important. We'll come with some examples of charts in a couple of slides here. But because of that, I picked Legacy. I'm happy with it. It's great. But like I said, there's many other kinds that are out there. No matter which one you pick, you'll probably be happy with it. What I did before I got it is I Googled something like best genealogy software. Look at some of the websites that hit. Just pick one and go for it. And you'll probably be happy with it, whatever you got. One thing to remember is that information can move between these programs using a standard format. It's called a GEDCOM. It's got an extension, GED, and they're very good at reading the stuff pretty well without a lot of errors. Thing to note is it has all the information on dates and deaths and links and all that other good stuff. What it doesn't copy is attached documents in the standard format. So if you spent a lot of time attaching a lot of documents and you get to a different program, you're going to be a little careful to make sure the new program will read the old program file directly and be able to pull the documents in, so you don't have to go back and reattach them with the new software. But that said, no matter what software program you pick, you're probably going to be happy with it. So hopefully that'll become a moot issue. A sample of software options, and I just Googled best genealogy software when I was putting the slide together, and here's the top 5 choices, and I just did nothing more than list them here. But Family Tree Maker, this is a very common one. To the Gottfried Library, this is probably used more commonly than any of the others. The people that use it love it. It's been around for a long time. It's good for working with others in the same tree. Evidently, it's got something that 2 people can work on a file at the same time when it's going through the cloud. I'm not sure the details. Legacy is what I use. It's good for charts. It's designed for Windows-based computers. So if you use Macs, if they claim you can use it with an emulator, I don't even know what an emulator is. I've never used one. I've never used Macs. But if we have other options that are out there that are just as good, I wouldn't mess with Legacy if you're a Mac person. Family Historian, again, it's just known for ease of use. All of these have a little bit of, learn how to enter stuff, how to delete stuff. You got to spend a couple of days learning how to do stuff, but once you get over that hump, it's all pretty easy. But this is Family Historian, is supposed to be one of the easier ones to learn. Roots Magic, one of its features is you can load the whole program on a USB drive, carry it with you if you're off in a library somewhere else. As a computer, you just put your USB drive in and you have access now to the full program. So that's helpful. Family Tree Heritage was the 5th one that showed up. And again, there's many other options available if you look forward. Words of caution here with software. Never, all caps, bold, underline, never link your tree to somebody else's. There are a lot of family trees out there. Many of them have errors. I've gone online on Ancestry, looked at people's family tree, and there's duplication of people. A lot of the information that's out there is wrong. What can happen is that somebody will see, oh, here's a person in common, but the person on this side of the link has other relatives. The person on this side of the link has other relatives. So you see this link, but there's other people that are in common. If you don't say they're in common, the program will just assume they're different people. So you end up with a duplication of an awful lot of people in there. Plus, you don't know that the information that you're downloading is correct. There can be mistakes in it. That the person that you think is somebody's father isn't, and you can spend an awful lot of time searching for ancestors of somebody who isn't really an ancestor because the person was just flat out wrong. That said, it's okay to look at other people's trees. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of the information out there is incorrect. It provides hints. Oh, maybe that's true. It's a hint for you to do your own research. And there's a lot of attached documents that you have in there if you get an ancestry and other or family search. They'll have documents attached, and you can look at the documents and say, oh yes, this is a marriage certificate. I know that the two people are involved. I know the date's right. Thank you. This has the information that would have taken me a long time to find. So feel free to download the information after you verify correct and include that in your tree. But your goal here should be to have a quality product. I've run into people that think that because they have 20,000 people in their tree, it's a great tree. But practically speaking, they haven't even looked at 19,000 of them. And a lot of what's in there is just flat out wrong. Your goal should be to have a quality product, a pruned tree that's all quality. Questions on that before I move on here on software? Nope. Sharing your results. Now, my note here says if you don't share your work with others, it will die with you. And that is the truth. You can spend 20, 30 years working with someone, and you can have it all in boxes and file cabinets and everything else. But if after you die, someone's going to come and look at all this stuff and go, what is all of this? And it'll just get thrown in a dumpster. And all that work will disappear. So you've got to find a way to share your results with others. And that was something that, again, one of the genealogy presentations, somebody pointed this out, and it really hit me. It's true. At that point, I had spent 10 plus years working on this stuff. And it was at that point I decided to start doing newsletters to share information with other people in the family. So at least other people will see it, and other people can provide you things that they know. Oh, by the way, I had this box from my mother of old photos. You know, those kind of things can come out of the woodwork once you start sharing your results with others. Main options for sharing are reports and charts. Reports can come out of the program. They'll write, I think I'll talk about this later, but any of the programs will write standard format reports based on your input, and they'll all produce charts of varying degrees of quality, but they're all very, very good. They're just different levels of good. A thing to remember, and this is the trap you can fall into. You can sit there and say, you know, when I'm done with this, I'm going to write it up. But you know what? You're never going to be done. That's the one thing I've learned. And no matter what you've learned and how much you've got sorted out, there's always a branch you want to find out, a little more information when they get here. So you got to think of this as kind of a lifelong hobby. So when you're done, because you never will be. Family history reports, the software programs that you may or may not have, they will write a variety of reports based on the information that you've entered. It takes their standard formats where people get numbered. You know, the first person that's listed will be 1. Their children are 2, 3, 4, and 5. The children of their children, if the last sibling was 5, they'd be 6, 7, 8, 9, and the children of the second. And so they basically number the people and go through, and they have a format for putting all the information in it. So it takes the information you enter and it puts it into text or into lists, depending on which options you pick in the reports. The wide choice of options that I note here, the software reports what I call functional, kind of kludgy looking writing. If you're a left brain numbers person like me, you look at it and say, hey, this is pretty good. If you're a right brain words person, you say, oh my God, this is terrible. I wouldn't give this to somebody else. They'd think I wrote it. It's horrible. But you know what? It's a good place to start your cleanup. So all the information you need there is just a matter of polishing and smoothing to get it so it looks nicer. If you use your own style if you prefer, and I do. I don't happen to like the standard genealogy format, so I use my own style. The standard formats are heavy into facts and figures and numbers and dates and stuff. I like stories. So I tend to go towards a format that's more story driven. It has the data in there, but I also leave places to put in the stories that I find. We'll find a little places later how you can find these old stories. So I use my own format, and that's perfectly fine. Again, I use newsletters. To me, putting together a 500 or 600 page report is just a daunting process. I am not a words person by my nature. So whereas I couldn't put together a 500 page report, I could put it together 50, 10 page reports. Each one is a manageable bite. That doesn't seem like too big a hill to climb for me. So I've been putting out newsletters to, a couple dozen people in the family. I like them, it's interesting. And that way I put out like 2 a year, more or less. But ultimately when I get done, if I do put together something at the end, that's a compilation of everything. It'll be conceptually just putting all these newsletters together into one place. So that's one option for you. It's not for everybody. That's what I chose to do. Family history charts. The software produces a variety of charts, and that to me is sort of a cousin to pictures because you can see everything you need in one place. For visual people like me, it's very helpful. And the software will produce these charts. There's options that control the appearance of the charts. I have examples of these 4 types later, so I'll hit you with those quickly just so you can see roughly what's there. They can display many generations, but they get big. Remember, as you go back in generations, you double the number of people. So if you go back 4 generations, you have a manageable size thing that you can put on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. If you go back 9 or 10 generations, you're going to use it for wallpaper. It can get really big. And note here, the charts can be produced in picture formats, and if you have photo editing software, you can take these pictures and embellish them even more. Highlight certain things and stuff. And I'll give an example of how I did that later. Let's start with a simple ancestry chart here. What this starts is one person, in this case, Edna Cornell, was my grandmother, and shows all their direct ancestors. So you see father, mother, and grandparents on this line, great-grandparents here. We got a couple people noted. We'll see them in the following charts. This is my grandmother's great-grandfather. So to him, he would be my 3G grandfather. We'll find this person later and this person later in other charts. And also, I did a big fan chart of this guy. So very recently, this was the work I did during the pandemic, my French-Canadian ancestor. So I have a fan chart of him. So I've got these people highlighted so we can see where they are in the future charts. But this doubles up. Now, if you imagine this going not 4 generations, but 8, pretty soon you can't get this on anywhere near on a sheet of paper. It's wallpaper at some point. A descendant chart is kind of, an ancestor chart starts with a person and moves up. A descendant chart starts with a person and moves down. So here's Moses Earl Moore. There's Orland Moore here. And again, my grandmother, 4 generations later, down here. Now, one characteristic of this is it doesn't have, whereas you only have the direct line of ancestors before, this has all of the descendants of this person. So it includes the siblings of your ancestors, and it includes their children. So this has cousins in it, whereas the ancestor chart does not. And again, because it tends to have more people, you can see this has more information on it than this one did. If you start going back 8 or 9 generations here, this will be 2 walls of wallpaper in your room. An hourglass chart is sort of a compilation of both. And here I focus on this person in the middle. It has an ancestors of all of this person and the descendants of that person. So you can see it starts in one person and it goes like an hourglass in both directions. So here it's starting from this person in the middle, and here's Moses Earlmore, my, again, third 2G grandfather, and my my 2G grandfather, and my grandmother down here. And the last sample I have for you is an hour fan chart. I show this one because it's a great way to have multiple generations. I have 11 generations here. You can't necessarily see it on the Zoom. Even if I zoom in a little bit, it'll help. But if you print this out, I got a print off of this on something that's 17 inches wide, and you can read right down to this last row of the people on it. So you can get an awful lot of generations in a very tightly packed thing. You're not necessarily wavering with it. So this is Alexander Cornell, that person before, and the way this works is similar to the ancestor chart. Father to your left, mother to your right. So here, the father's father, the father's mother. So you work your way out all through time, the same format as you had before, but as people get smaller as you get out, you can condense it into one sheet. And this is an example of how embellishing something with photo editing software can be good. What I mean here is that I decided to, all the ancestors, all the people that were immigrants to North America, are highlighted in yellow here. And French Canadians, you gotta love them. They're great with genealogy. I was able to trace all of his ancestors to an immigrant back, most of them are from the 1600s. But one thing that jumps out when you look at this, and this is why the charts are sometimes helpful, you see kind of a hole over here, a little gap, group of people that arrived more recently than the others. And you say, well, that's interesting. You look into it, and it turns out that these people arrived in North America at the same time everybody else did, but they went to Nova Scotia. And right about this time in history, Nova Scotia went from being French to being British. The British had some difficulties with some of the French who weren't particularly thrilled that they were there, were causing some difficulties. So their solution was to basically outlaw being French. If you were French, they threw you out. This became known as the Great Expulsion. Like many of the upheavals in history, still echoes of that that are reverberating today. But my family got caught up in that. They were in Nova Scotia, got thrown out. Some of them ended up in Quebec, the Quebec area along the St. Lawrence River. Many of them, by the way, ended up in Louisiana, which is another French-speaking area. A lot of them ended up in Boston and New York, but they basically, all the French got thrown out of Nova Scotia. And so you learn about history, and it jumps out. It's something I wouldn't have known about if it hadn't been for this chart and all those highlighted people showing up as more recent generations. So, let me get back to the full size. Questions there before I move on to the next topic?
Yeah, and I had never seen that chart before, Tim. I like that.
Yeah, and again, this is it's a pretty good size.
Yeah.
Roll it up and put it under your arm and roll it out on a table and see everybody. So it's a very helpful format. That's why I wanted to bring it up here.
Did you have that chart printed a specialty printer?
No, I can print 17-inch roll paper. So
Okay.
I through Photoshop.
Okay.
But yeah, if you want to go, go to BizWiz or there's a lot of things that you can just save as a JPEG and go have them printed. Just save it as a JPEG right from your from the software. And the software has all kinds of options. How big do you want the blocks? How big do you want the fonts? Do you want pictures? Do you want not pictures? So you just pick something and it opens up and say, "Oh, I'm not sure that font looks too big." And so you play with it a little bit. You get it like you like, and then save it as a JPEG. And there's an awful lot of printers. Just go to Google. BizWiz is one that I've used here before for stuff. If you just go in with the file, they'll print it for you, and it's not too expensive.
Okay. Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to DNA testing. And this is probably the most controversial thing of genealogy, and it's a recent development. When you think of controversy in genealogy, historically, most of the controversies have been over the quality of the site that you need to get into some lineage society or something. This is controversy that hits the evening news. We'll talk about how that works later, so you're aware of what DNA testing can do, the repercussions of it, which don't bother me, but I want everyone to go into it with their eyes open. I note here that it's probably going to be interesting. It's possibly very useful. There was a whole major branch of my family that was unknown, and I was able to find that branch through DNA testing. And there's a whole long story behind that I don't want to necessarily get into now, just because of time concerns. I can spend half an hour on that, and if somebody's interested, they can catch me later. But it does allow you to find that major branch of your family because somewhere there's the unknown father. You can find out oftentimes who that person is. Not always, but oftentimes. It is occasionally controversial, as I mentioned, and it's not for everybody. In addition to the law enforcement implications of it, there's also surprise results. Think of the answer is you've got 3 people in their 50s or 60s, they're all siblings. They decide, hey, wouldn't it be fun to do DNA testing? So, a month later, the results come back, and one of the 3 of them learns that they're sibling to the other 2. Those things happen. And that's not necessarily something you want to bring up with Ma at the Thanksgiving dinner table, Be aware that surprises can happen. These surprises can be upsetting to people. So just be aware of that. I make a note here about medical testing issues. There are some of the DNA testing service that say they can do medical testing stuff. Are you susceptible to this type of cancer or to various things that are hereditary and hereditary issues? My suggestion on that is that the commercial DNA tests are not of medical quality. If you have concerns about whether you're susceptible to a particular form of cancer, go talk to a doctor, have a medical test, have it done to good medical quality, because what you don't want is to run into a situation where you end up with a false positive or false negative. It can cause an awful lot of problems, an awful lot of concerns. Go see a doctor if you want to get medical testing done. How does it work? This is my most complicated sheet. I will just boil this down at the end to one statement. But people have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 are called autosomal. They don't have anything to do with the person's gender. The last pair, the 23rd pair, are either 2 X's or an X and a Y, 2 X's if you're a woman, an X and Y if you're a male. There's also DNA in a person's mitochondria that's separate from this. It's part of the cytoplasm, part of the stuff that gives the energy in the cell. It has its own DNA. I'll talk about that in a minute. What we look for in there, they call these things called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. There are changes that you find within the human genotype, which are common among people, that bring out the unique aspects of a person. Some mean nothing. They're just quirks, and it's in DNA that doesn't do anything. Some bring the characteristics that we have that make you unique. These SNPs, if they match over a good length of DNA, it's likely that the DNA is shared. And they measure how much DNA is shared. There's a unit called a centimorgan that is a measurement of the unit of length of DNA. And the more closer relationship you are to somebody, the more shared DNA you're going to have, the more centimorgans they're going to have of shared DNA. And this is where everything really kind of comes together here. If you get DNA tested, you're going to find they're going to try and match you to other people. They're going to come up with one number that's going to be the number of centimorgans that you share with this other person. The greater the number of centimorgans, the closer you are related to them. And they can estimate your relationship to them based on the number of centimorgans, estimating somewhere between a first and second cousin, or you might be a third to fourth cousin. They can't tell you exactly, and there can be a range, but they can give you a sense for how close you're related to the other person based on that number of centimorgans that's provided. I note here at the bottom, if you're looking for a missing branch of your family tree, it's very helpful if the website has a lot of people with trees listed. What I found was that if you're looking for a missing branch of the tree, you're going to find relationships to people and they're just names. You have no idea who they are. If they have family trees in there, you can look at their tree and you can find, the way I was able to find that branch is I found roughly a third of the people that I matched to that were third cousins or closer were people I knew. A third didn't have trees in there. I didn't know anything about them. Another third that had trees in there. They were all descended from a common person. So I said, okay, my missing link must be in this tree someplace. And then by looking at where, roughly the person's age, roughly where they lived, blam, I was able to find out the missing person from this. So if you're looking to find a missing branch of your tree, Ancestry has a lot of people with family trees in it. I'll talk about the ones later, which ones I did. Here we go, types of testing. I think the next slide has the testing service. Types of DNA testing, the autosomal DNA test. This is stuff that's inherited from both parents, the 22 pairs of genes. And again, the better the match, the more shared organs, the closer the relationship. And the matches you're going to see, they'll say, this is between a first and a second cousin, or between a third or fourth cousin. And you find a lot that are, fourth or sixth cousins, and it's like, okay, it gets hard to find them at some point. Y DNA test. Again, only males can do this. They only have the Y chromosome. It passes from father to son. So it's your father's 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 father. It's one, now remember that fan chart? It's the whole line along the, in fact, I'll jump back to it. It's your father's 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 father's. It's basically, so I have the same, I don't. This person has the same Y DNA as this person here. I don't have it because my grandmother's in the middle. Don't inherit Y genes from your grandmother. But basically, this person has the same Y chromosomes as this person. We're talking mitochondrial DNA. It's the mother's 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 mother. So this person has the same mitochondrial DNA as this person down here does. So it's a very thin slice of that. But it can be helpful. So anyway, it passes father to son. Women, don't despair. If you have a close male relative, a brother, or if you have like a first cousin, where both of your parents are brothers, you can use their test and get some information from that. Similarly, mitochondrial DNA, men and women can take the test, but it passes through the cytoplasm in the egg cell, so it's from the mother. And so it only explores a person's female line. So these are limited in scope, and they're not as helpful for finding missing branches of your family, finding second cousins and third cousins. It can be helpful under limited circumstances. I haven't gotten a lot of information out of them. It is the autosomal test that I find to be the most useful. The testing companies, I've done it through Ancestry. I've done it through Family Tree DNA. I have not used GEDmatch yet. We'll talk about them for a minute, and that's where all the police work comes into through them. Ancestry is autosomal only. It's a saliva test. You're going to find a saliva test or cheek swabs. Here it's autosomal test, saliva. 23andMe, autosomal. They do Y and mitochondrial tests. They have options for medical testing, which I will discourage, as I did before. Again, a saliva test. I've done Family Tree DNA. That's a cheek swab. I did that at first because I came from a DNA testing seminar. They talked about Y and mitochondria. I thought, oh, that's cool. I'd like to get that done. So I've done the mitochondrial and the Y DNA test. I find it's dead-ended. It's not real helpful. I haven't been able to do anything useful from it. I find it not as useful as the autosomal, but it's there. Feel free to use it. My heritage, similarly, autosomal and cheek swab, which leaves us to, and these tests run in the $50 to $100 range. GEDmatch it's not really a testing service. What they do is they allow you to download your results from whichever testing service you use and upload it through here. If you take something, if you get a test through Ancestry, they can only match you through other people that are in Ancestry. Similarly, the testing I've done in family tree DNA can only match you to other people that are in family tree DNA. If you take the information you upload it to GEDmatch, say if I've uploaded my ancestry results into GEDmatch, and somebody from 23andMe uploaded it into GEDmatch, GEDmatch will match us, find out how close our relationships are through them. So it's not so much a testing service as a service that allows you to upload your results and compare to other people that upload their results. What can happen, and this is the full disclosure stuff here. Let's say I upload my stuff into Ancestry and I get a bunch of matches, and they usually have messaging services between people. If you want to exchange data, you probably have to go off and get somebody's email address, and that's fine. But you can get, I did a lot of work finding that missing branch of my tree through this, and it's helpful. If I had uploaded in GEDmatch, I would have gotten another bunch of stuff and another more information, and maybe found a few more, oh, who's in that picture, and a lot of other stuff, which is helpful. But let's say I do that, I find it, I touch base with another dozen or so people, and then I forget about it, and 5 years go by. Pretty soon I have somebody knocking on my door. I answer the door, and there's a police officer and a detective there. And what they want to know is, they want to know about anyone who's a first or second cousin. What they've done is they've got DNA from a crime scene that's 5 or 10 years old. It's in a dead end. So they take they go to whatever testing service they want to use with this DNA sample. They upload it to GEDmatch, and they found, let's say, I'm a first cousin to second cousin to the person that they've got at the scene. So being helpful, I say, okay, sure, I've got my cousins over here, first cousin's here, my second cousin's there. Yeah, where do they live? Oh, this person's here. This person is, I don't say Orlando. Oh, Orlando. Gee, that's interesting. What's this person's name again? How long has he been there? You say, I don't know. I only moved there 15 years ago. I haven't talked to him in a decade or so. I don't know if he's still there. Lo and behold, we find out, 2 days later, my first cousin, once removed in Orlando, is arrested because they know he's the first cousin to me. They know who my first or second cousin. They know my first or second cousins are. They know who was at the thing. They basically find out who it is. They get a DNA sample from however they get it, and blam, they match that to what's at the crime scene, and this person's arrested. And that's when you start hearing about the stuff, the police work that goes into it. That's a typical thing for how it works. Now, remembering that I may have a whole branch of my family who's now upset with me because somebody's father, somebody's son, somebody's uncle just got arrested because of information. As far as they're concerned, I ratted them out. So be aware that that's possible. I don't care personally. My belief is that I didn't do anything wrong. If they get somebody who did something wrong, that's their problem, not mine. But this is a full disclosure thing. Be aware of what can happen here. So I think that's it on DNA testing. I'm getting towards the end of this, so we'll move quickly through the last couple slides here. But any questions on DNA testing before I go on?
My question doesn't concern DNA testing, but I know we're nearing the end of your presentation. Do the next, do the next couple of slides cover storing your information, or did we pass that?
I think the best way to store it, we passed by it.
Oh, okay. I'll be specific. I have legacy software. I haven't entered any information yet. And I know Legacy used to provide cloud storage, but that they don't do that anymore. I was, I'm doing paper charts and I was planning, I have an external hard drive, but that's another story. I was going to use a thumb drive, a flash drive. I don't know if how do you store, or if I use a flash drive, I don't know what size to buy.
Actually, to some degree, I do mention this later, but I'll touch it now because it's an important thing. For the most part, first off, there's the hard copy stuff that you have and how to store that. I usually scan it and link it to the stuff in the software.
I see.
To me, is the best way to do it. And a lot of the stuff you get is downloaded. I don't even print it off. I download it, I save it, I link it, and it doesn't even turn into paper. There's a stuff I just keep. Understand that you have an electronic, you can print it at any time. So
Pardon?
you have file cabinets full of stuff. So I link everything to the person in the software. What I do though with the software, you can back it up, and every time you leave it, it says, do you want to back it up? Your answer should be yes. And I actually do talk about this in a slide or two, of my things I've learned that I talk about. But I have a cloud storage with my Office program. And so I will store it in that cloud there.
Okay.
Obviously on a hard drive, I store it on thumb drive. I back up my hard drive to another, it's more than a thumb drive, you know, it's a terabyte size thing.
Okay.
And there's a lot of services that will do cloud storage. I really think cloud storage is a good idea with stuff like this. It sounds terrible, but if you store it on a thumb drive and you have all the stuff in your house and your house burns down, you've lost it all.
Right. I have Microsoft Office, but not Microsoft Office 365. And the bottom line, I can't upgrade to Office 365 to get the 1 terabyte cloud storage. So I think I'll have to explore another service. But yeah. Okay, then a thumb drive.
That is really important. And like I said, I'll mention that later.
Okay.
But really keep it, because you don't want to have 2 decades worth of work all disappear in a fire in the house.
Right.
And this is,
thank you.
Learn from my mistakes and helpful hints. And this is, we'll come back again. Again, never link to someone else's tree. I've beaten this to death, but I actually did this once. I started linking stuff and I ended up with so much crap that I just started over again. So please just don't link to somebody else's tree. Reference everything. And I say, yes, everything, no exceptions. When you enter your own birth date, cite it as, you know, Tim Honan, personal information, personal knowledge, so you know where it came from. No, you will not remember where you found it in a decade or two. You think, oh, I'll remember this. No, you won't. Not a decade or two from now when you there will be conflicting information, and you're going to have to decide which of these 2 pieces of information is right. And if you don't have a good site, you don't know which piece of information is right. Even with good sites, sometimes you don't know. But some are more credible than others. I say here, talk to your older relatives soon. Prompt them with questions. Use your cell phone to record the conversation. I have talked to a couple of people, but by and large, you look at this now, there were people that died since I started doing this that I would love to be able to talk to now. Remember, the information in their head dies with them too. So please talk to your older relatives when you can. Talk to them soon. It's amazing how much information they have that they would love to share with you. Helpful hints. And this is why I say, look for the stories, not just the data. This is my own personal thing. If you're into data and everyone's birth date and death date and marriage date, and that's fine. But you read the documents for statements that lead to a good story. And these are true statements that have come out of stuff that I've done in my research. There was a death record from the 1600s in French, from the French Canadian, and it noted, executed with her husband for the murder of her son-in-law. It's like, oh, that's interesting. You start looking into this and you find that this was the first murder trial in French Canada, in New France. Next one, marriage annulled due to perpetual impotence caused by malefice. It's evil sorcery. That's like, okay. It turns out there was jilted suitors involved and curses put on people and all kinds of stuff. It was fascinating. And again, bring your ancestors alive. The story people like to read about when reading the reports that you put out. Another one I was looking for, remember Moses Earl Moore? He was the top person in those charts earlier. His will, it started the first paragraphs, and he had two sons and a daughter. His first paragraph was usual, being sound mind and body and all that stuff. The second paragraph said, and this is all that it said, to my son, Albert K. Moore, I give nothing. And the third paragraph talked about my great-great-grandfather and the stuff, and then that was my great-great-aunt and the standard stuff. It was like, I saw this line and I just, there's a story behind this. And it turns out this is a story from the early 1900s. And this story translates into, he had an American wife. He also had a British wife. The British wife and this guy were in Germany. The whole group is machinists. He's running a factory making Crown bottle stops in Germany in 1914. This was a problem to be an American citizen or a British citizen like his wife was in Germany in 1914 when the shooting started in World War I. So there's all kinds of emergency visa requests. I mean, it was a great story that I got from just this one statement that normally I don't look at any details. I find out if there are siblings of my ancestors, but I don't look at them in detail. But when you see a clue like this, you can't help but look for that good story that's in there. Again, the relatives of information or attic or basement, copy or scan the documents or photos, photograph mementos. Again, I got a box of photos from my cousin. I scanned them all in and mailed the box back to her. I was so grateful to get it, and a picture before was one of them. Old family Bibles, if somebody has one, it's a great source of information. Get involved with genealogy organizations. I talked about them before, so I won't dwell on them again. The Connecticut State Library has a wealth of information. And again, you get a library card free for Connecticut residents. Here we go, back up your file.
Oh, okay.
I read a thing in one of these tutorials or something. It said there were 2 good reasons for not backing up your file when you were leaving the program. One was that you just opened up the program, you looked for a piece of information, you didn't change anything. And so you're going to leave it and you don't have to back it up. The other good reason is if your house is on fire and there's flames coming through the doorway. Every other circumstance of backing out of your program, you should back it up and take it, and I save it right directly onto the cloud with my backups. If you don't have the cloud that you can save to directly, save it to something backing up on jump drives, back it up on other drives that you have. What I used to do when I was working was I would back up my hard drive and take a copy of it into work, and I'd leave it in the file cabinet at work. So if my house burned down, I still have the version at work. If you have, and it's a good idea to get a cloud service, back it up and save it to the cloud. Because you don't want to lose all that stuff after 2 or 3 decades of work. Other helpful hints, women are recorded with their maiden names. If you start using their married names, you're inconsistent with how things are normally done, and you're not going to find the earlier, younger records. You're better off just leaving the last name blank if you don't know what their maiden name is. Many people cannot write their names, so spelling becomes phonetic. They go to the local priest and he asks, oh, I'm going to marry you, fine, what's your name? And he tells them what their name is, and the priest would write it phonetically. So their death record, someone would pronounce it, and there'd be a different priest spelling it phonetically a little bit differently. So spellings of names have a degree of, sometimes you have to pronounce them out loud to see if it's the same between two things, I find. Ages are often wrong for a host of reasons, including people not wanting to know their neighbors how old they are. So when they write their obituary, it ends up wrong.
Mhm.
I've gotten cases where I've heard of it, I swear, the census taker went and knocked on the door on the left side of the hallway and no one was there. They knocked on the door on the right side of the hallway. They talked to that family. My ancestors were on the left side of the hallway. They say, hey, do you know the people over here? Oh, yeah. Oh, can you tell me? And so the information is based on what the neighbor knew, not the person reciting their own information. So the person has oftentimes reason to shave a few years off of age. So age is is it a birth date or a baptism date? If it's a civil record, it's probably a birth date. If it's a church record, it's probably a baptism date, and they are often used interchangeably. Similarly with date of death, or is it a date of a burial? Civil record will be death, a church record will be burial. They're often used interchangeably. So be aware you can be off a couple of days on birth and deaths. Dates convention. Oh my goodness, this is another one of my favorites. I'm zoom in on, oops, wrong thing. Let me get back to where I was here. Pause, sure, I don't want to do that. I want to go to check participants. Does that do it? That doesn't do it. I want to go back to this. Uh-oh. I've got to learn how to get out of this thing. Show task. Oh, I know what's happening behind here. Let me zoom this down. And slideshow. Here we go. I think I'm back. Hopefully I'm back on track again here now. What did I just do? There we go. Bear with me while I get back to that slide right near the end. And I think it is the last slide in the presentation. So I apologize for the confusion here. But let me zoom in. Look at the dates here. There's this I call month. This is the month. This is the day of the month, and this is the year. If you have a number that's, you can usually tell a year from the other two. If you have a day that's above, if you have a number that's above 12, you know that's a month. But this is like a real credible site. This information is populated by volunteers that are earnest and hardworking, and they all have different conventions. So the first one you have month, day, year. The second one you have day, month, year. Remember, this is one source of information. Down here, month, day, year. This one is day, month, year. This one down here, day, month, year, year, month, day. This one, at least you can tell, is different because the 4 digit means here. This is the interesting one. 5/05/03/13. What is this? Is this May 3rd or March 5th? You don't know. There's no way to tell. So be aware that weird stuff can happen here. And sometimes you don't know the date. And again, a bit of caution. And the last thing I have on the last slide here is, what year is it? Where was my, God, there's my cursor. Back in 1752, they officially moved the convention of the start of a new year from March 25th to January 1st. There was about a century or two in advance of this, they anticipated doing it. This is when they were going from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And this is for those, if any of you ever wondered why astrology years start on the first day of spring, That's what it is. March 25th was effectively how the first day of spring had migrated on the old Julian calendar. So as they were anticipating this change, some used the new calendar, some used the old calendar, and some used both. So a lot of times you'll find dates for January, February, and March. They'll be off by a year because they could be using the other date convention. And a lot of times you'll find a date that'll be like February 3rd, 1723/4. What it means, it's 1723 by the old calendar and 1724 by the new Gregorian calendar. So be aware you can be off by a year, especially if the date is in January, February, March. The dates can be reversed. The date convention can be off here. The birth date, baptism date, death date, burial date, ages are wrong. Anyway, a lot of stuff can happen that throws errors into this. So be aware of them and anticipate having to deal with them over time. So that is where I end. Any questions on anything else in the presentation here? And I ran just about an hour and a half. So I'm more or less on, not too much over schedule. So hopefully I didn't drag on too long and didn't stop people from getting to other things. Questions for anyone?
Tim,
No, go ahead, John.
I had a couple of comments, and one of them was ancestry.com. And I've done a lot of research on my own family history and going into Ancestry, but I'm finding out that in Ancestry, anybody can put information in there. So is it right or wrong? Some I know for a fact, I've known the people and I know the information was put in wrong, or they have 55 kids. And you're wondering, how did they ever get 55 kids? I don't know. It depends on who put the information in there. And the other thing I was also looking at is, I'm a member of the Connecticut Society of Genealogists out of East Hartford. And if you want to go into a town hall, some of them, the clerk will go into the vault to look for what you're looking for. But if you have a membership in a organization like the genealogists, you can go in there and look. And I know friends of mine have done this, and they have had information which they're looking for. And if they go in and a clerk goes in, a clerk is going to get a very small amount of information, where something else on the page could really help answer your question, but you're not going to have a chance to get that unless you can see it yourself. But beyond that, this has been a hell of an interesting presentation. Thanks.
Yes, thanks very
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Yeah, and John just echoed what I had said, is that you watch out the information in Ancestry. Anyone can put something in there, and they do it with the best of intentions, but I know information in it that's wrong. And that's go clicking on the green leaves and think, oh, I've got my ancestry traced back to the 1500s. Isn't that great? No.
Right.
There's a lot of good information in there. Download it, look at it. If you believe it's correct, and a lot of information is correct, then you manually insert it into your tree. And yes, if the laws on looking at like birth records and death records and stuff, there's a blackout period. I don't know if it's 100 years or whatever. It's sizable, so most people can't get it to. But the laws allow, if you're a genealogy researcher, to see if you're doing genealogy research, to get that, and you're carded. Well, some of these organizations deems you to be a genealogy researcher, which gives you access to a lot of those civil records that people can't get to if they're not deemed to be researchers. A lot of the more recent records, as John had mentioned. So that's helpful, John. Thanks for reminding us for that.
Yeah, and I have that too, and that is helpful. And I would just like to say that in my experience, the best part that I love is being able to go to the town, to the state, wherever it may be. I personally like to do, go there myself. And that's when you get to meet people. You get to go into whether it's vaults. And again, if you're doing something like that, it's really up to the person that's managing it, whether they let you in or not. And I've had that experience of some letting you in, some not letting you in, some being usually it's the country towns. But going somewhere is the best. It really is. You can find so many things. There's so many resources when you go to the town, the state, wherever. And my niece who's here knows when we went to Upper New York State a couple of years ago, and that's when we went in just a couple of days back to 1600s and something in our family, one of our lines that we didn't even know we would find. So it's really a lot of fun. That's when you really get hooked on it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all the comments. This is Jack again. And Tim, I want to thank you for your presentation. I'd say it was
Yes, thank you, Tim.
probably more at graduate level than Genealogy 101. I'd also like to add that for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we just did a major renovation to our library, and part of the plan is to increase our genealogy section. So we invite anyone to come down, visit our library, see what we've done so far, and let's talk about ways we can help in genealogy. So if there's no other questions or comments, I think.
Jack, this is Gail. Can I
Go ahead,
say a
Gail.
couple of things?
Sure.
One, again, Tim, thank you very much for when we asked you. This is certainly more than we could have expected. You just gave us a great program, and we should be paying you. But I'm really glad that it got taped. And Jack, did you mention the August program?
Yes, I did at the beginning. We mentioned it.
Okay. So, and for those of you that are thinking about paying your taxes, if you pay them in person, please note the pictures that are at the entryway to Town Hall by the tax department. Those are pictures that Tim enlarged for us, and they are the farms of Rocky Hill, the original farms.
Oh.
So if you don't know what farm your house is on, you can stop by Academy Hall, and we have a map, and someone can help you find out which one of those farms your house is probably sitting on. And those will be up until the end of August. And once again, I just want to thank everybody for supporting our programs. And if you have ideas for programs, please just send them in. And I'm still looking for cookbooks that were published in Rocky Hill so that we can have a program later in the year or at the beginning of next year. So that's all I have to say. But just again, Tim, thank you so much. And I'm really grateful for the day you walked in and joined.
It's good to be
Thanks, Tim.
retired, so I can do that kind of stuff and start doing what Lori's been doing all along, is going to town halls and stuff and doing my genealogy research. It's not just online.
And, you know, I'm from Kentucky. So a lot of the stuff that my daughter and I research now, it's graves that are on farms. And there's a lot of Kentucky rules about who's supposed to maintain those and everything. But we've been, you know, kind of tried to be run off with a gun, that type of thing, when we've been looking for. Most people have been very, very nice, but you always get a neighbor. And we figured out they were probably growing something that they didn't want us to know, that they didn't want us to know, and I could have cared less what they were doing. But anyway, it's just really interesting. But we found that with the dates, they were all registered. Everybody had like the same date, because the judge or whoever was riding through the area, he would just take every newborn, and then he would register the births when he got back to the county seat, and they all got the same birth date. So it was really tough getting, you know, the families would have the right date, but everything else was a different date. So it's been a challenge. So, and of course, there's no baptism dates when you get down to the South, very few. But anyway, thank you again.
Welcome, thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll look forward to the next one, which will be on August 19th for Boats on the River. And be sure to tune in for that exciting program. And we thank you again, Tim, and everyone for participating tonight. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Night now.
Night. Night, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Night.